Thank you for tuning in to How Did You Get There, the podcast, where it's all about the journey. It's about the twists and turns, the trials and triumphs that bring people to where they are right now. Today, I have with me a guest. I'm very excited because, Dan, you are my first male guest.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Is Thank you for joining me, and thank you for being so gracious and agreeing to come on the podcast. So Dan is a senior leader in a world class safety and security solutions organization. He is a dad, he is a husband, and he's our guest today. And Dan has promised me that I can ask him anything, so I'm really looking forward to this.
Absolutely. Yeah, looking forward to it.
So, Dan, this is perhaps the most difficult question that anybody has ever asked, right? When they're asked, who are you? So, for people listening and they're wondering, who is this Dan that we've got on today? Who is Dan?
I think you kind of summed it up quite well. I think that who is Dan? I'm a father of three, first and foremost. I'm a hard worker. I am a people leader. I like to lead, mentor, motivate people to deliver the outputs that we see. I love my job. I absolutely love my job. I love working with people, and I like making sure that we can, I suppose, what's the right way? I think who is Dan? Dan is a motivated individual that wants to do well as well.
I love that. And something that I heard about you actually is that you're very invested in developing people. So it feels as though you're paying it forward because you've said you're a motivated person who loves to motivate as well. Kind of going back to your childhood, how did your childhood shape the person that you are today? This person who's so invested in motivated and leading others to success.
Well, okay, so we're going back to my childhood. Wow. Okay, fine. So I think that we went from my childhood days. And if I just take it briefly, I've got a brother and a sister. I've my mum
Yes.
and dad separated at an early age, and I was very much
Hmm.
driven to support my brother as well, who was also very young. I'm the eldest,
Yes.
and I think that for me is something where if I was to put a point on where I liked to help mentor to a degree, it's being a big brother.
Hmm.
You mentor your little brother. You probably antagonize the hell out of them as well. But
A little bit, yes.
but you do as you grow older, you start to sort of try and mentor and mold as best you can and support your siblings and close friends as well. I think that I played rugby to a very high standard, which is kind of
Okay.
yeah. That was I part of a Saracens academy and various other did England under 16 trials and that sort of stuff. And I think there's a massive cultural side of leadership early on at a very young age was drilled
Hmm.
into us,
And
and that
perhaps
was
discipline.
yeah. I think there was an element of being disciplined, being in what you do.
Hmm.
We was doing 3-4 training sessions a week, or a group of people that were all
Wow.
working to one common aim. And I think there's synergies that you can transfer into the work life from a sports life of any type of sports life that you've had. So for me, I think that's kind of laid a foundation and a groundwork. And then if I was to go forward on that springboarded my personality into my work life, which started at the ground up. Yeah, so I think that's a quick overview of where at the beginning.
Yes.
That's probably an overview of that.
Yeah. So you just said that you started from the ground up.
Hmm.
How did you get on this path? Because did you know that this was where you wanted to get to, or did you just stumble into it?
No, it was so I was playing the rugby. I was playing a semi professional level, about to go into the professional element. We'd just done the Daily Mail Cup final, which was held at Twickenham for at sixth form, and I decided drastically that I basically tore my hamstring. I then did my cruciate ligament upon my
Yes.
recovery, and at that point, I then found out that I was going to be a dad. Well, at that point, you realise that okay, you need money coming in, and
Yes.
I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll go into security, and I'll just do a couple of shifts a week, just whilst I get rehabilitated, and then I will
Hmm.
go back into rugby at some point. Anyway, the cruciate ligament didn't hold up very well, and it wasn't thing, so I carried on doing it. I then decided that I was going to be a carpenter, and I did a college course. I'm a fully qualified carpenter, and I don't know
Oh,
what
wow. That's good
it.
to know, just in case you
Yeah,
need some
yeah.
help around.
You need a door hanging,
I
and
know. We just call Dan.
yeah. Well, and from there, I kind of decided I was working. I was doing shifts and needed to earn money. And then I found out a year goes by, and I was being a relief officer at the time. I then went into going into full time because I found out I had another daughter on the way, and yeah, I kind of threw myself in at that point and in for a penny, in for a pound, and kind of decided that this was going to be the career for me. I didn't know what though. That I make that very clear. I went in as a security officer level, relief officer level, and I didn't have a clue about this side that I'm now doing now. So many years later, 20 plus
Hmm.
years later, it was very much I wanted to learn from the ground up. I wanted to understand the operational side, the day-to-day running. I wanted to understand, policies, procedures, being the best at designing and developing them. And I really kind of had a lot of people go to college and university. I think that I had the college and university from ground up of that. It was surreal
Yes.
how much we learned, or how much I learned, and a
Yes.
couple of colleagues that were with me along the way. So yeah, so that's where when I refer to the ground up, I suppose that's what I'm referring to.
That's very inspirational because you see a lot of people who go into the security industry, and a lot of times it's not necessarily that they think I'm going to do this intentionally. Kind of like me, when I became a mother, I recognized that I need to provide for my child, and that meant not really being selective but doing whatever it took. So for you to start, as you've said, from the
Mm,
ground and
mm,
climb up the ladders,
mm.
within your organization, that is really very inspirational. Something else that resonated with me is the change in perspective when you became a father.
Oh yeah.
What was that for you? How did Dan change at the point that he recognized that he had a child on the way?
Responsibility. I was a carefree
Yes.
young man previously, where all I wanted to make sure is I had enough beer money to go out with my mates, and I wasn't
Yes.
even bothered about driving. I had a motorbike, and which kind of says a lot when as long as I've got a motorbike, which only fits one person really on, maybe two, but one person on
Yes.
it, and everything changed. The whole world went from you've now got responsibilities, and that you have to develop yourself as well to be the role model that you want to be.
Yes.
And I
Hmm.
think that was where everything changed. Everything clicked for me. I think I became me when I became a dad.
Yes. And generally, a lot of women, when they speak about their stories at the point that they become a parent, it's a case of, I became a parent and somebody had to make the choice to be home, to be
Hmm.
the main caregiver,
Mm.
and then somebody had to, has to go out and do the work. What was that dynamic like for you and your wife in terms of you focusing
Yeah.
on career and getting to move up the rungs
Well,
versus, being the caregiver at home?
I was so I remember if I go to when my son was born. I've got a 20-year-old daughter now, a 19-year-old daughter, and a 15-year-old son. And it's probably easiest to explain with my son. When he was born,
Yes.
my wife and I sat down, or my now wife, we weren't married then. My girlfriend, I haven't called her that for a long time. We sat down and we we kind of agreed that I would. We're going 15 years ago now, right? I decided that I wanted to work. because I wanted her to have time at home with our son. And I thought that was really important. She
Yes.
wanted that. It was mutually agreed. And I ended up having two jobs to be able to support her going back. When she was going back to work, she wasn't going back full time. So I did door work as well. So I was doing relief security
Yes.
from 7 till 7. I was then doing door work from probably 8 p.m. till midnight, and then going home, do
Hmm.
the midnight feed where possible, and then going back to work the next day. And I
Yes.
remember I held
Yes.
that down for a period so that she could go back 3 days a week into her original. She was an accounts assistant at the time, and an accountant, sorry.
Yes.
And we then we were very very fortunate enough to get the support of her mum and dad, which meant moving closer to her mum and dad. But we moved there, and we just kept thinking to ourselves, it's only for a few years. It's only for a few years. Because once
Yes.
was in school, it opened up more opportunity for us both. And by that, I meant me not having two jobs. And and we kind of muddled through. It was hard. It was hard. I was probably doing. I mean, there was no such thing as the working time directive back then. It was. Well, I was
Yes.
probably doing 84 to 90 something hours a week, like every week.
Whoa,
Um,
that's a lot of hours. Yeah.
yeah, and it was just to make sure because the industry was a different industry back then as well. It wasn't. I would argue that it's not the highest of paid industries at times. I think it's underappreciated in terms of
Yes.
the value that it brings to businesses. But
Hmm.
I had to do that at the time just to make the amount of money that we needed. And I mean, look, it's not a worries me thing. It was something that I walked into with my eyes absolutely wide open and in agreement with my now wife at the time. And it made the moments more special when we did get time together as a family. I would point that out. It was a
Yes.
pendulum swing on
Yes.
that, right? So yeah, that's I suppose how it felt at the time was challenging. Um, Mood swings were like that for
Hmm.
me. When you work that many hours, sometimes you
Yes.
just want to go to bed. Sometimes you want to spend some time with your wife. Sometimes you want to see your son or daughters. And yeah, it was difficult, but it was it is what it is at the time.
Yeah. And I notice, I think we almost people who exude a lot of strength, a lot of outward strength, it's almost this thing of I've got to do this. Let me just go on with it. Let me move forward because I don't have a choice. How did you take care of your own mental health during that period? Because
Mm,
I I find that as somebody from a Caribbean background, mental health isn't something that they ever spoke about when I was growing up. It's when I came to the UK that I heard it being spoken about. I probably had, after the birth of my first son, perhaps was suffering a little bit with postpartum depression. Never heard about it. Were you conscious about those feelings, the highs and the lows, and managing them? How did you do that?
I, I I don't think it wasn't even back then. It wasn't really a prominent conversation. I'm so pleased that the industry as a
Yeah.
whole and the business that I work for now is massively at the forefront of that from an industry
Yeah.
perspective. I think that
Yes.
we kind of I did things like going to, I know it sounds silly, but going to the gym. And as long as I had
Yes.
certain things, I wasn't 18 and a half stone back then. I was, I was a rugby player that, just was still semi fit and
Yes.
healthy. And I think that, I had hair back then for a start as well. But I think for me, it was going to the gym. As long as I had my regular, repetitive, um, uh, I suppose they say about cognitive behavioural therapy and things like that on mental health. There's CBT and other items, and I think that one of my coping mechanisms was having regularity in my diary. I needed to have
Yes, so having
whatever.
that routine.
Yeah, routine was really key for me to be able to cope with it for that period of time. And you know, when I took annual leave, I took annual leave. I made sure I had when I had triggers that was if I was getting too far into my repetitive routine every week of 84, 90 something hours a week, then I would have to,
Phew.
right, this weekend I need a break, I need a breather, and I would make sure that happened. But I think I'm so pleased that it's more recognised now and not a taboo topic
Hmm.
to be able to speak about. I think that's an important step forward for everyone.
Yeah. I think when I look at the growth that you've experienced as a human, but professionally as well, it seems as though whether or not you recognize it, you're so committed to self improvement.
Mm.
And that shows in terms of what your leadership is, not only improvement of self, but recognizing that by building other people, ultimately everybody wins. So, what is the role that that growth and self improvement has played in your own journey? Was it deliberate, or was it something that just came along and you rolled with it? You just went with it and thought, okay, this is going to help me to grow. This is going to help me to be better.
Well, I think it comes from the mentality of a team, and I'm fortunate enough that when I became, if we take sort of, I don't know, maybe probably it was back in 2012 ish, that sort of time, and I was a key account director at the time, and or key account manager at the time, and I had the opportunity to build my own team from the ground up. And I really saw that investing time in people yielded fantastic results. I had this opportunity to build a team, and I did find the more that you invested time speaking, engaging, understanding, developing, mentoring, and the more investment you made into the people, the better the output came. And that was really, really apparent. The
Yes.
more time on the ground, speaking to people, engaging, telling them why. And now I look at it retrospectively. If you look at someone like Simon Sinek's Golden Circle concept of the why, how, what, and when I looked at the why and explaining the why to people, people became really involved in it. They really wanted to understand it, and
Yes.
they did well. And obviously that wasn't
Yes.
100% across the board, but the yield that we were getting out, the output that we were seeing was fantastic in comparison to previously. So I suppose that's where it sort of first flipped for me from a work perspective, that the more you engage, the more you speak about and explain things in detail, the more you'll see of the individual. And I tell you what, if you invest in a bit of time with people, it is amazing the output that you can get. You can find different ways of working. You can find a diverse perspective on things that you wouldn't have seen necessarily. And I pride myself. I've got probably one of the most diverse and different thinking teams in the. I would argue
Yes.
in the industry. And I love the fact that it's so diverse. I love the fact that we get so many different thought processes that are different. And when you see that come together and you get the best output as a result of it, you're onto a winner. You really are. And I've seen
Yes.
that time and time again.
I'm very fascinated by your why, how, what. So I'd like to explore that a little bit, because what's your why? What's that thing that gets you out of bed every morning so that you can go out and inspire and deliver whatever outcomes you're tasked to deliver?
My personal why, I suppose it links. I'm very fortunate in the position that I'm in where I can affect change at a senior level, and I can both positive and negative change, but I can affect change. And I love the fact that's my personal why, is that I love the fact that I can help steer the industry, not just the business that I work in, but the industry as a whole. I love that. I think that's fantastic. I like doing these sort of podcasts. For me, if we can inspire one person as a result of doing this,
Yes.
this has been a success for me. That is my why.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong. I've got the senior leader mode where you have to go into at times, of course, but seeing people grow and develop, I love that. I think that gives me a bit of a kick. I like seeing people develop. I like seeing people grow. Um, and I think that's really your key performance indicator of whether you've done a good job in mentoring somebody or not. Seeing them grow from strength to strength, and I've got various people that I've worked with before over the years. Some have gone to fantastic heights, which so proud of, and that's actually conversely that's something that my mentors invested in me, and I think giving back is something that does give me a bit of a kick, if I'm honest with you, to people.
Yeah. And let's move on to the whole, because I'm conscious that as you said, you started, you were working as a relief officer,
Yeah,
you did whatever needed to be done. But how do you move from that level, kind of that starter level, to
yep,
getting to a point where you're a senior leader in a globally known company? What
yeah.
does that path look like?
I was very fortunate. I had somebody who has the same why as me, and they
Hmm.
recognised that I wanted more from from what I was doing at the
Yes.
time. And they asked me outright. They said, "Do you want to be mentored?" And I asked what that meant because I didn't have a clue what that meant at the time. And he explained that it would be a case of looking at my CV with me. He would see where I've got experience and where I've not got experience, and it would focus on my strengths and weaknesses. And he would give me the things that I'm weakest at to make me stronger at them, and allow me
Mm,
to have the exposure and support to get better. And I said
yes.
absolutely would love that, yeah. And I found myself involved in a bunch of projects and various bits and bobs that I had never done before. And I
Yes.
kind of, I suppose, I bit his hand off to be a part of that. And that was my first step.
Of course.
But there was a very difficult decision that came as a result of all of this. So when I had that experience, and I did it for about 18 to 24 months, and I was quite comfortable where I was. And the industry was slightly different back then, and I had to leave that business that I was in if I wanted to go to a manager role. And that was quite a
Yes.
big decision for me, because unfortunately, it was one of these stumbling blocks where to get a manager's role in the business that I was in at the time, you had to be a manager. So it was a catch-22. You can't become a manager until you've been a manager, and it was, well, how does that work? So I ended up finding a very small contract that I was able to leave where I was and move into that as a contract manager. And it was a very small contract, as I say, but it gave me the title of manager. And when I got that, I then ironically found a new mentor, and she was fantastic. She gave me again. She explained to me around the profit and loss, P&L, that sort of stuff, and explained finances to me. Don't forget, I've come from a operational side from the ground up on the operations at the time,
Yes.
and I hadn't really had an understanding of the financial side of the industry. So I was fortunate enough to get a bit of a mentoring on that side. And I spent the next 2 years getting another mentorship around finances and P&L management and things along those lines.
There are two things that really stood out to me at that point while you were speaking about what that journey looked like. The first thing is that you've had some really supportive people who've been on the path with you. And from the get go, you've spoken about having, Mrs. S, girlfriend turned wife at home, who really supported
Mm.
and that mutuality in terms of the decision making. You spoke about having mentors who invested time in you. But you
Mm.
also spoke about being at a point where it almost felt as though it was a crossroads. It was,
Mm.
do I stay where I am, or do I go to down this path to get back to where I need to
Mm.
get to? How do you know what decision is the right decision when you're faced with either choosing the right mentor, aligning
Mhm.
yourself with the right people, or deciding to pursue one path as opposed to another?
My brother has a saying. which he said to me from day one. We've been giving each other advice for years, and he is, since we've started giving each other advice, he's always said that the right decision is usually the most difficult one, and it's simple in
Ooh.
its approach. It's but we've kind of gone down the route of I have people that I bounce off: my dad, my brother, my sister, my wife, and I suppose ultimately I get advice from people that mean the most to me, and that are impartial. And then what I normally do is I make a weighted view on, can I continue to grow where I am? And I suppose the decision is, I could carry on doing what I was doing and being quite comfortable, being mentored. But at some point, I needed to stand up and say, I believe that I've learned everything I can from that person. And I now want to move almost sideways or upwards to move more upwards. And not just in terms of my career,
Hmm.
but in terms of my knowledge and growth. And I think that's probably a really difficult decision to make for anyone, but it's something where you have to be
Absolutely.
really you do have to be honest with yourself though. I think that you have to say, have I learned everything I can now, and do I want to put that into practice? Um, and that's kind of how I've looked at it to make those decisions.
Hmm. I still think that's a little bit difficult because I find that oftentimes in life, when you're faced with both paths,
Mm,
you do want to default to that thing that you know because the unknown can be so scary. Have
mm,
you had those type of fears? Do
yeah.
you fear the unknown, and how do you combat the fear so that you don't almost prevent yourself from having new experiences and growing?
Oh yeah. I mean, I say the right decision is always the hardest one, but I've made those tough choices sometimes when
Hmm.
they've been the wrong decisions. But I don't regret
Yes.
trying them. I've learned the most when I've made the wrong decisions, because it's made me really think next time a bit deeper, about why I've taken the decision to
Yeah.
do that or that. I've taken roles which were the wrong roles to take. I have taken the right roles
Yeah.
that didn't give me the most growth. So yeah. In 20 plus years, I've made some terrible decisions, but
Yes.
I, I think that there is, however, positives to take away from every negative, and I think if you can challenge yourself enough to be able to find those positives, then you can take something positive from a negative for sure.
One of the things that I always think about with leadership, because I have aspirations to climb the corporate ladder and
Mm,
get to the very top. And I know my why, right? I know what drives me. And it's
mm,
quite similar to yours in the sense that I want to be able to open the door to other people like myself who perhaps don't see themselves breaking the glass ceiling, so to speak. But one of the
mm,
things that I'm conscious of is that the more senior you get is the more difficult decisions sometimes become.
mm,
And sometimes the decisions that you have to make, you've got to weigh up your own values
mm,
and kind of sometimes trod into gray areas,
mm.
that areas that might be morally gray for you, and you're like, I don't know if this feels quite right. It can be something like, the company's going to restructure for financial reasons. They've got to do cost
Mm,
savings exercises, and you having to lay people off, and these people really intimately. How do
mm.
you manage some of those tough decisions or decisions that might have some gray areas from a morality point of view from for you?
I think it's firstly understanding the why you're doing whatever you're doing. This is where I go back. I live
Yes.
my whole mantra by
Hmm.
this. Um, you know, Understanding why you're doing something. Understanding why you're doing what you're
Hmm.
doing allows you to firstly review the how you're going to do it, and the what you're
Yes.
going to do. So if you was to say you're going to restructure from that, there's of course in any senior leadership role there's difficult decisions that you have to make, but it's making those decisions
Yes.
from a fact-based position. I don't like making
Yes.
decisions based on opinion. I like making decisions based on fact, or data. And I think that making sure that everyone is given the same opportunity is probably a key part of that. If you say about the morality element, I think you need to be from a moral perspective. You need to make sure that you have put in place a process or an explanation of the why first, so they robustly understand why you're doing and having to do what you have to
Yes.
do, because that's an important point. Um, and then you need to make sure that whatever process you put in place, you morally are happy that it gives everybody the same and fair and equal opportunity to, go through that process, whatever that process may be. And I think that's, if you've done
Yeah.
that, you can almost negate that grey area by making sure that you do that.
You know what, Dan? I love the way you think, and I want to unpack that some more. I don't
Oh,
necessarily believe in binaries, but we're going to do a little bit of binaries, right? Because I want
okay,
to do a little bit of either or with you to see which direction you're going
okay,
to go in.
okay.
So let's start with fate versus determinism. Do you believe in fate, or do you believe that people have control of their destinies?
I believe people have control of their destinies personally.
Yes.
Do you want the why
Do you not
or?
believe that you've got Well, I just want, yeah, I want the why, but don't you believe that you have people who are just born to do a certain thing? Beyonce. Do you not think that she was born to sing, dance, and be the superstar that she is? And regardless of what she would have done, she would have ended up there. Or do you think she worked really hard and she made that happen? And she could have been, Beyonce working in, I don't know, in insurance.
Mm. Well, I think it depends on the individual on that side. I think that if somebody's got a gift or an ability, they have to want
Hmm.
to use that gift or ability. Is Beyonce, to use your analogy, is Beyonce the best singer out there? She's a great singer. Would you say
Absolutely not.
she's the best singer? No.
Yes.
But she's probably one of the most, fantastic performers, maybe. But I think
Hmm.
that she had a deep desire to want to get to the level that she's want to get to, and I think this is my opinion, obviously only. But I think from my perspective, you've got a want and a desire to get the best you can out of what you've got, and I think that you have to have a little bit of luck as well along the way. I do agree with that. I
Yes.
think that I've seen, to
Hmm.
use the rugby players that I've seen, and rugby's an easy one for me to go back to because I understand that. I've seen absolutely fantastic rugby players at a club level that had no desire to go to professional level because they could earn more money
Hmm.
going into the industry as a whole, because the rugby industry is not like the football industry where everyone's paid God knows how much per week. But I know that people who are fantastic at that level and decided not to, which kind of
Yeah.
says that they were in control of their own destiny.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you 100%. I've got another one. I think I know what you're gonna say, but
Okay.
let's go there. Which do you rely on more, your heart or your head?
Oh, that's quite hard. That's quite hard. I think that's quite hard. I think it depends on the decision, first of all. I think that's what I'll caveat it with, is that it depends on the decision. I think that I make any decision that I make from a business perspective, I use both. I have to. It has to sit right with me from a moral perspective. It has to sit right with me from a heart perspective, as well as make business sense. So I suppose from a head and heart perspective, I would look at both elements. From a personal perspective, all heart. And, I, I, I decide on the decisions that we make. I mean, we've made some massive. My wife and I moved. We moved from one area to another area that was quite far away from family, friends, work, and we did it
Hmm.
because it felt right. No head decision.
Yes.
In fact, when we moved from close to London to a little village where we are now outside, quite far outside of London. I worked 2.5 hours away at the time from where we moved to. My daughters live closer to London. We had to move my son's school in year 5, which I'm sure you would appreciate having children yourself. The
Yes, that is
taking
not the best time to move, is
no,
it?
no, and everything we had no family there. We was moving 35 to 45 minutes further away from family than we were already, and it was absolutely, from a head perspective, the wrong decision. Never regret it. Absolutely think it was the best move we ever did, was to move where we live now, because we are so much happier, and everything just fell into place over 18 months, and it just happened. And that was a pure heart decision on that one.
Yeah. I can relate to that, but I tend to think of it as my gut. And I
Mm.
don't know. I will, even when we moved to where we are now, my husband, he was in, well, boyfriend at the time, he was in Iraq actually.
Mm.
And we decided that we wanted to move into our own house together before we got married. Never been here, and I was looking at first, it was thinking, okay, price point, best place to raise two black boys in Britain, because I didn't think being in the center of London was the right thing anymore. But when I drove in, I thought, I can see myself here. I could even imagine myself getting
In your
old
gut.
here. And then when I stepped into the house, yeah, in my God, it wasn't the perfect house by any means,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
we've been here for almost 7 years, and we've made some great memories here, and it's
yeah,
just been a
yeah.
happy space for us. So I can't my gut is something that I can't really explain, but
Mm.
I know that it's never really steered me wrong. And in fact,
Mm.
when I go against my gut, generally that's when I make not my best decisions. So, and then finally, what matters more to you? Everybody always says the same thing. I don't know if people are being honest, but let's go. What matters more to you, money or love?
Money or love? Love of what? My family or my job or what?
No, just love. Love. Just
I think
sheer love.
love for sure. I have to go with that. I think that, well, that's a difficult thing, because I think there's an absolutely stark reality, and maybe it's because I've lived in council flats and stuff like that before. I've had no money, and
Hmm.
I had love, but I didn't have money, and it was great, but it wasn't, in terms of, we had each other's backs, and we were, my wife and I, we went through all of that, but it's a lot easier with money. It is, just to be able to pay the
It is a
bills and
little
stuff
bit
like
easier,
that.
isn't it?
It is a
Just a
little bit
tad,
easier,
yeah.
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 So, but yeah, love for sure.
You've spoken a lot about the things that you really value, and we've spoken about your career journey, how you started off, at the very beginning of your career, and it was really you having the necessity of providing for your family. And
Mm,
now you're in a position where you can inspire, you can motivate, and you can develop talent.
mm.
What constitutes a meaningful life for you? What is the
Now,
meaning of all this? And we've spoken about your why. Yeah. What makes life
yeah,
meaningful, and what does success mean to you?
I stopped measuring success a while ago. I think that being
Hmm.
happy in what you do is, for me,
Yeah.
something that's critical. I mean, my dad used to tell me, my nan used to tell me from when I was a boy, whatever you do, just love it, because you do more of that than anything else in
Hmm.
the rest of your life. And I think that, so the measurement of success, I don't think it's your bank account. I think it's the enjoyment of what you do, because you can enjoy
Hmm.
what you do and be very, very rich, by doing that. And I don't mean
Yeah.
financially. I think that,
Yeah.
for me, I'm quite young still, I like to think, and I've still got a lot to do. There's more challenges for
Yes.
me, that I can lay down, and try and further myself. For sure,
Hmm.
I've had different mentors. Even now, I've still got mentors that have, guided, steered, supported my development. as a leader. And I think that, and I would
Hmm.
always applaud those people because I think they're fantastic because they don't have to invest their time, and they do. Um, so I think I would continue to do exactly that myself, and that for me, giving back and doing that
Yes.
still, it is, I think, what will keep driving me.
Yeah. It's interesting that you've said that you stopped measuring success a while ago. What was that turning point for you?
I think,
Why did you stop? Or is it that because you have, from somebody on the outside looking in, people might say it's easy for him to say that he stopped measuring success, but because he's reasonably successful compared to a lot of other people. So what was that turning point for you to reframe what success meant and what really mattered in your life?
I think success for me wasn't just about work. Success for me, and
Yes.
I'll bring it back to a family. I measure success on, I've got three children that I've raised with the right core values that are turning into three
Yeah.
very different, three very fantastic people that I'm proud,
Hmm.
immeasurably proud of. I've got one daughter that
Yeah.
has is a bit of a wants to be an entrepreneur and
Hmm.
she's taken down very similar to route to what I've taken, but wants to go and be an entrepreneur and stuff, which is great. She's a wonderful person inside and out. I think my middle daughter is at
Hmm.
university at the minute, and she loves the academic side, and that's fantastic. My eldest daughter, keep her away from books because that's not for her. She doesn't want to do that
Yes.
side, the academic side, where my middle one did. And my son is just turning into an absolute gentleman, more so than I ever was at his age. And I think again he's
Hmm.
got aspirations of what he wants to do. He is growing up into the man that he's surpassing what I thought I wanted him to be. And I
That's
think that,
brilliant.
yeah, and for me, I suppose when that started happening, I stopped thinking about my work success because I only ever wanted
Yeah.
to inspire them to do the best they could in any industry that they worked in. So you say
Yeah.
about my why, that was one of my reasons at the beginning. I wanted to say, whatever industry you work in, could be cleaning, maintenance, security, quantity surveying, building trade, whatever you do, if you choose to, you can move up the ladder to whatever you want to achieve if you put the work in. And I suppose I wanted to inspire them that they could do that. And I think I stopped measuring success when they believed you could.
Wow, that's really powerful because as a parent, that's one of the things that really keeps me up at night.
Hmm.
Is if there's one thing I don't want to fail at, is at producing, humans who can go out in the world and be the best version of themselves. And I
Hmm.
think that's genuinely something that worries me because I've found parenting to be really difficult because, our oldest son makes questionable decisions. And it's really difficult to not look at that and wonder, oh my gosh, why are we not getting this right? But I absolutely agree with you. When you can look at the people that matter the most in your life and see that they are doing their best and know that you even played a little part in that,
Hmm.
that's magnificent. There's nothing that compares.
I,
And
I, I,
if you could, yeah,
I was just going to say, I think as a
sorry,
parent,
go on.
one of the biggest things that you ever want is that when you are no longer here, that they are well equipped to deal with
Hmm.
whatever life throws at them. And I think
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's really, you know, forget work for a second. That's just, you want that for your children. And I think that for me is something when
Hmm.
I think that I'm comfortable that if anything happened to me, hopefully nothing happens to me, but if anything happened to me, I think that they would turn into the people that I know they can be.
Yeah. What's next for you, Dan? What do you have on your vision board?
I think that, what's next? That's an interesting. I think I'm happy at where I am now. I'm in a good place.
Hmm.
I enjoy
Yes.
leading, motivating, inspiring. If I could do that on a larger level with more senior people, then I would absolutely love to do that because the higher you can do that, and the higher you can affect, leading people the right way and developing those individuals the right way, I think the more you can cascade the change if you do that. I mean, I've
Yes.
managed to be fortunate enough. My wife suffers with anxiety and has done for a very long time, which is something I've shared with people before. And I think that, I've managed to become a part of something that the business I'm in has made a very big step change in promoting that. And
Hmm.
that's really personal to me. So I'm able to support that.
Absolutely.
And I think that if I can continue to do those things that are personal to me and need to be changed, then I would love to continue doing that sort of work, because that's meaningful work.
Yeah, that's powerful, isn't it? When you're able to do something that really makes a change beyond your little circle. And I know it's a little bit perhaps morbid, but I always think about, if I should go, what do I leave behind? And it's those things that create legacy, that
Mm.
live way beyond any of us. It's those little changes and affecting another life. If you could, if you could give young Dan, the Dan who wasn't a father as yet, had a girlfriend, embarking on life, and other people who are at a similar stage
Yeah.
in their lives, a one piece of advice before you go, what would that be?
One piece of advice to a younger Dan. I think it would be to constantly assess what makes you happy and drive
Yes,
towards that. Foot fall down, pedal down, drive towards the things that make you happy, because then you'll enjoy whatever you do.
Dan, that's such a powerful way to end my first podcast with a male guest. Think
Yeah,
about the thing that makes you happy and just go for it. I love
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Dan,
Well done.
thank you so very much for joining me today. I've enjoyed every bit of this conversation. I've learned so much, and I'm sure that at least one person will get something from this, as you'd hoped.
That's it.
If people want to connect with you, is there any way for people to connect with you beyond this podcast if they want to?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, and please feel free to reach out to me, Daniel Slade, and yeah, by all means, connect.
Thank you, Dan. And to continue following the HDYGT podcast, How Did You Get There podcast, we're on Instagram. It's hdygt.pod. And let's hope if you typed in How Did You Get There in YouTube, I'd pop up, because there are a couple of How Did You Get There's. And How Did You Get There, the podcast, is also available on whatever platform you watch your podcasts or listen to your podcast, rather. So thank you so very much for tuning in, and tune in for the next story where we hear about people's journeys. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.